Hello and welcome to episode 136 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, Toyota may finally be waking up to electric car reality. Turns out they just slept through their alarm, which went off 5 years ago.
The Fully Charged Live show is coming to Australia. James and I are still waiting for our invite to the Canadian show, but we would love to go to Australia and hang out with our 2 listeners there.
87 countries hit the tipping point on clean energy, all thanks to a secret cabal of wealthy flesh-eating pedophiles.
Liz Truss, the UK's solar-hating Prime Minister, has resigned. The new PM is Rishi Sunak, who I think is a head of lettuce. I don't know. I just wasn't really paying attention.
All that and so much more on this edition of The Clean Energy Show. I was going to list all the other things that we had to talk about this week. I apologize to Australia again for my Southern Hemisphere ignorance. Our city buys an electric truck, and we hear why they think it's a good idea. And all kinds of wonderful things that we're going to have to speed through because I got a big fat show for you this week.
I have a big fat story for you this week. I was on a lovely electric car road trip to Saskatoon, our city to the north. On the way home, decided to stop in Moose Jaw, which, as we've said before, is a real place.
Yes.
And man, I got caught in the worst blizzard I have ever been in my entire life.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I'm only 48 minutes away from there. I don't understand. Why was it so bad?
Yeah, well, this was a weird fall storm. We've had really warm weather here. Like it was plus 20 Celsius just a few days ago. And they'd had some warnings out. They called it a snowfall warning. But I have, a bone to pick with Environment Canada because it really should have been a blizzard warning.
They have criteria for blizzard warnings, Brian. It has to be windy and zero visibility and a certain temperature. Depending on the region, it actually varies by region. This is our Canadian Weather Service, and it's...
That's right. And I think the one thing we may not have had was temperature because it was only around zero. But we had all the other things. So we wanted to stop in Moose Jaw on the way home to take a few pictures.
Why?
It was for work. My partner had a bit of work to do, and it involved taking pictures in Moose Jaw. So yeah, the snow starts to fall, and we start driving in Moose Jaw, and about 30 minutes out of Moose Jaw, the snow was just getting super heavy and thick, and cars were going in the ditch. This is a fairly small highway, just like a 2-lane highway. And we had to slow down to like 40 kilometers an hour, 50 kilometers an hour. I just about lost control of the car at one point. It started to slide around. I managed to regain control, but it was a serious white knuckle drive. Those last like 20 kilometers into Moose Jaw, we were worried we weren't going to make it. There were cars in the ditch.
People slept in their ditch overnight, man. That could have been you.
Yeah, exactly.
How much of a charge did you have at that point? I have to ask.
We rolled into Moose Jaw with a 20% charge, which
that's not great. That's not great for spending the night.
Well,
I just don't know. I don't understand why you thought that was a good idea. Because I'm going to flash back to Friday night in the weather forecast here.
Do know that there is a special weather statement in place through much of southern and eastern Saskatchewan, and there will be major impacts along with this, Natasha, including possibly some treacherous conditions on the road, so people should prepare for that, and maybe some power outages, so it'd be good to have an emergency kit as well. I'll have a full update coming up a little bit later.
It's almost like they saw it coming.
I heard that same report, and they said, some snow, and it probably won't stay around. It'll probably melt. I don't know. I don't think we were sufficiently warned.
What did they have to do? Come at you with a taser?
A blizzard warning. It should have been a blizzard warning.
No, you stupid old man. A blizzard warning is there for a reason. It means it's a blizzard. It doesn't mean the highways are not going to be passable. It could be a light freezing rain and a beautiful day. The sun could be shining and it could be just as treacherous. A blizzard warning is a blizzard warning.
It was a blizzard. It was definitely the worst snowstorm, whatever you want to call it, the worst one I've ever driven through. And we just barely made it. And then we had to stay 2 nights. We had to stay 2 nights in Moose Jaw.
That's absurd.
Because the road was just not.
Did you get your
quite
pictures
safe.
taken at least?
No, we did not. It was
oh my God.
Yeah, we'll have to go back. But yeah, we could have maybe driven back on the second day, only stayed one night, but the road was still... the Moose Jaw was the epicenter for this storm. That it got around a foot of snow in Moose Jaw. Yeah, but, we got to stay at the lovely Grant Hall Hotel in Moose Jaw, which is this historic hotel on Main Street. And we had power the whole time, but on the other side of Main Street, no power for about 8 hours. Half the town was without power, but we were relaxing comfortably in the Grant Hall Hotel. It was quite lovely.
All right, I have here the blizzard threshold criteria for Canada. The national, except for north of the tree line, which is, well, that varies in various parts, I guess, where suddenly it becomes forest and it's not prairie and whatnot. When winds of 40 kilometers an hour, that's a calm day around here, or greater, are expected to cause widespread reductions in visibility to 400 meters or less due to blowing snow, or blowing snow in combination with falling snow for at least 4 hours. You're right. I think it should have been a blizzard. If that's all it is.
Yeah. And really the main problem was I didn't have my winter tires on yet because it had been so warm out, and I'm usually on top of that sort of thing. So I got them put on this morning. They're on there now.
Well, you're lucky.
But without winter tires, it's definitely a little bit more treacherous.
So winter tires is usually based on temperature when it falls below 7 degrees Celsius, which is 42 Fahrenheit. I don't know, something like that. And yeah, it's based on temperature. It's based on how grippy it is in temperature. But as you said, it's typical here, isn't it? It goes from summer to winter just on a flip of a coin, just instantly.
Yeah.
That is a lousy story, because what did it add to your trip? I mean, without the picture taking, just going through that route, like, how much longer it adds. It's not that much. It's like 20 minutes or something.
No, but like, it turned out to be kind of a lovely time. Had some.
Oh, of course it is. When you're retired and you've got Tesla in the stock market, everything's lovely when you're stranded.
I was not in a hurry to get
But
anywhere.
most of the city didn't have power. Most of it didn't for 9 hours. And some people didn't they couldn't get out to this was an underestimated storm. I think, what the reason was? Is because they expected it to be like half a degree warmer. And just that half a degree turned it from raining to snowing.
To snow.
For a longer period of time. And I think the fact that it was so close to zero had, if this was minus 20, like way below zero, way below freezing, the snow would be snow and powdery, but this was wet and icing and, it's slush.
Exactly.
Messy
stuff. I've driven through lots of blizzards before, but it's usually colder than that. And, it's annoying, but it's fine.
I was watching television the other day, and you know how I say that I see EV commercials when I watch football games? I realized it's everywhere. It's not just football games. I've been watching a lot of Netflix lately, so I haven't watched too much TV. But I've noticed it's nothing but EV commercials. There was this moment the other day when the wife says to me, after the umpteenth EV commercial, she says, "How does it feel to see the prophecy you made many years ago come true?" And it's true. I mean, we've been on the air doing this for almost a quarter decade now. And, for 10 years before that, you and I would talk about this stuff and we would follow this stuff. And certainly for 20 years back, my whole life, but there wasn't much to follow until the 21st century came around and EV started to show up in different forms. And then we did predict all this. I mean, you and I personally did, and we went on other people's who know better than us predictions, and it all made sense to us, and we had evidence to back it up for different reasons. And then we became EV owners, and we realized, well, why would you want to drive anything else? And that's what most people don't get. They don't get how great EVs are and how they are superior to gas vehicles. And why would you want to drive anything else? So, I love my car. God willing, it keeps working.
Now, I have a weird caveat to that story. So I was watching the Straight Pipes on YouTube, my favorite car review channel, friends of the show. Yuri's been on the show. And they had a review of the new Mercedes-Benz EQS, fully electric SUV. And, it's a very expensive car, lovely Mercedes. But there's a new trend now in electric cars, or cars of all kinds, particularly like Mercedes and BMW seem to be doing that, is subscriptions. You got to pay subscription fees for certain features. So we've got a clip here.
The thing that I don't like about this is OTA downloads. You have to pay
over the air.
you have to pay for certain features that you get into the future that you didn't pay for when you bought this car from the dealership.
So like hardware features that the car can do and have, but you didn't pay for.
Yes, so you pay a yearly subscription fee to some of those features. Now, there are 3 features I'd like to point out. Number 1, trailer maneuvering assist. You can pay per year for the car to help you do that.
Okay.
Number 2 is augmented reality navigation. If you want to see all that cool stuff,
That I can kind of understand
That one I
because like
can.
maps change and stuff, whatever.
Yes, and the third one being extra degrees of rear steering angle.
Yeah,
now
I'm done. That hit me and I'm like, no.
That doesn't make any sense. What the hell?
Yeah, that's the weirdest one. So the car's got 4-wheel steering, so the rear wheels will turn to shorten your turning radius. But to get extra degrees,
You have to
of
pay the
turning on
price,
your
obviously.
rear wheels, you
That's
have
just
to pay
effed up, man. That is
an
just
extra year. Yeah.
I mean, it was frustrating
Now-
enough when somebody started charging for heated seats as a subscription. But this is,
And I guess the sort of to play devil's advocate, a lot of people who buy a Mercedes or a BMW, I guess, are rich and maybe they don't care. But that one particularly just seemed weird. And then the trailer assist too, because that's kind of like a safety feature, like you want to be able to help your drivers, pull a trailer as safely as possible. So that seems a weird one to have to
what's
pay
next? Airbags? You won't be able to do up your seatbelt unless you pay us a fee. Jeez.
Yeah, it'll do an instant payment just before the airbag goes off.
Well, there's at least one jurisdiction in the United States who wants to outlaw this type of thing.
Yeah.
But you'll have to wait till lightning round to find out who.
Okay.
The results may surprise you.
I've got just one more thing. This is a follow-up to last week. Of course, we had our exciting new segment, Brian's Book Report, last week.
Exciting as hell, yes.
Yeah, I talked about Ducks, the new graphic novel from Kate Beaton, which is about two years in the oil sands. She worked in the oil sands here in Alberta and Canada and wrote an amazing memoir about that time. And I just wanted to mention that she's on a cool book tour where she's got a slideshow. She's got a musician from Cape Breton coming with her on this book tour. So if you're interested, Vancouver is November 1st, Los Angeles, November 2nd, Seattle, November 3rd, Portland, Oregon, November 5th, Calgary, November 7th, Winnipeg, November 8th. I might even go to the one in Winnipeg because I'm retired. What else have I got to do?
This podcast?
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
I'm not allowing you to go unless you get an interview with her.
Well, then, I don't want to bug her. She seems busy.
She's busy. She's doing a book tour. That's what the book tour is for, is to do interviews, to do press. I'm sure she'll be happy with the press.
Okay, well, I'll get our,
You're just being lazy.
intern to...
That's what you are.
Our intern can set up an interview there.
Oh, I'm sure. You can just throw it a nice little tweet request. And if she says nothing or no, well, okay, so you move on. You move on.
We'll see.
It is time for me to once again apologize to Australia. My daughter, 14 years old, on the phone all the time on apps and games and things, has friends in Australia for some reason, which is not good because we are in a very different time zone than Australia.
Sure.
So my high school student is staying up all night because of this. This is one reason why she doesn't do well with
damn
sleep.
Australians.
Yes, it's their fault. If she ever goes missing, I have to go all the way to Australia to look for her. So that's not good. Yeah. So she said that something to me that seemed absurd. And she said 2 out of 3 people in Australia will be diagnosed with skin cancer by the time they're 75 or 70 or something like that. And I thought, no, that's wrong. Did you check your sources? Because I'm good at getting my kids to be skeptical. To have skepticism. This is something you can not teach your kids enough, especially in the world that we exist in now. And so she's good at that. And damned if she wasn't right, Brian. Apparently, I found multiple sources that say that that's true. But it's still, okay. So whether it's true or it's just high, let's just go there. Why is it high? I thought, okay, Australia, they don't have winters. They get snow in some places in high elevations, and they're opposite, obviously, to our climate. But I always associated them with being close to Antarctica because you go through Australia to get to Antarctica. But they are as close to the equator as you and I are to Denver. It's a day's drive if you could drive, if there was a road, you could drive in 13 hours or, 12 hours to the equator. That's really close.
So it's hot and sunny is what you're saying.
Well, yeah. And that's why I had this misconception about the Southern Hemisphere. And, I was shocked and kind of embarrassed about how much I learned from The Long Way Up, which you mentioned on last week's show, which is a motorcycle, EV motorcycle, in this case, travel log from the southern tip of South America up to Los Angeles. And I was amazed at everything, and I realized I don't know anything about it. And I realized there's this ignorance that we have in the Northern Hemisphere about the Southern Hemisphere. My son points out that it's mostly ocean, Dad, don't worry. So I looked at, bias, and I got this Wikipedia page, and it shows I tweeted this out, the hemisphere, if the globe was upside down, if we put them first, and there's not much there. It's mostly ocean. And I don't know. I apologize for being ignorant about it. And yes, if you send us there, we will certainly learn a lot more than we do, because Australia is kind of like a sister country to us. They're in the Commonwealth of England, and they have a queen or king now. And, we were about the same population size, roughly.
Yeah, about the same number of people down there in Australia. And yes, we would love to go. Please invite us to fully charged Australia as well as fully charged Canada. But
do you admit that there's a bias, an ignorance about the Southern Hemisphere from a lot of people?
Well, I know I'm ignorant about it, but, geography's never been my strong suit.
Well, I'm just amazed at how close it is to the equator, and no wonder they have, the solar potential they have. I thought it was just, kind of desert, sunny days, dry climate, but it is close to the equator.
No, and we have pretty hot, sunny summers here as well. So I'm a little worried about my own skin as I get older. I'm definitely going to get checked because I got a lot of sun exposure when I was a kid.
Yeah. It's always good to get things checked out, especially if a mole is bothering you or anything like that. And you can always get your partner to take a picture of it and compare it to the internet. Send it to your doctor, all kinds of things you can do. Another thing that I was surprised by was from the Canadian Renewable Energy Association. They represent all the people who install solar and wind and everything else. They said that Canada will need 10 times more wind and solar energy supported by energy storage like batteries to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Now, they implied that was a lot, and I thought, well, it must be at least 100 or 1,000. It doesn't seem like we have any, but to make it only 10 times more, it seemed like we're so far behind. We're at the tip of the iceberg of what we need, but 10 times doesn't seem that much in 30 years.
Yeah, I guess our problem maybe here in Canada is, as we've said before, we've got a largely clean grid. We have tons of hydroelectric and nuclear, so no greenhouse gas emissions. It's like something like 82% clean, our grid here in Canada. But maybe that kind of makes us lazy and complacent, like replacing that. We're not only going to have to replace that 20% that's dirty, but as we've said many times, energy use is going to go up a lot in the next little while. So if we don't start deploying this stuff more quickly, and we could be in trouble.
There was a CBC opinion piece on the grid adaptation needed for electric vehicles in the city of Calgary, Alberta, and the person knew what they were talking about. They mentioned a lot of the same things that you and I talk about on the show as a potential solution, such as charging at night, such as charging when there's extra solar, and a smart grid and the smart home chargers and stuff like that. But he also mentioned studies that said that EVs only charge for 2 hours a day. And most people charge at 5 o'clock at night when they get home. Now, that's a problem because that's the peak time of day, right? If everybody plugged in their EV and it sucked in 6 kilowatts, that would be a problem. I don't charge at that time. I set my charger to be charged by the morning, to spend as much time as it needs, but it's charged in the morning. The reason I do that is because I make this assumption that the grids may be cleaner at night where we are, because we have a lot of coal on the grid. So I figured maybe it's cleaner at night. Because the renewables are more into the mix. The other reason I do that is because I think that, I'm giving my battery a break. Instead of like discharging it and then charging it up all in one thing, I give it, maybe it'll help with the longevity. Regardless, it usually doesn't matter. So, however, I got to thinking, AC, air conditioning, is like 1 kilowatt to 3 kilowatts for an AC compressor to run. And if you've got a heat wave, then, you know, the peak is going to be about 5 o'clock at night when people come home from work and cool down their homes. Or if they're already cooling them, it'll be the hottest part of the day in the summer. So what's really the difference? I mean, the grid, in California had some close calls, and so did Texas from heat waves. But it's not that big of a deal if, you know, if it can, we've handled heat waves just fine. Electric car charging, I don't think will be even as bad as a heat wave, because people can be, if they're not already, told to charge at night, incentivized to charge at night with clean, you know, cheaper electricity, which is a no-brainer. And I wonder sometimes. All I'm saying is I'm skeptical about the warnings that people throw up about, oh, the grid's not going to be able to handle EVs.
And none of this is going to happen overnight. So, we've got several years to keep working on this and hopefully nip it in the bud before it becomes a problem.
Okay, here's some things I wanted to throw in as well. Okay, I saw a commercial on television with an EV charging that wasn't an EV commercial or a car commercial.
Okay,
I think that's a turning point wow. Like that kind of really blew my mind. It really sunk in that this is normalized now. You know, I can't remember what commercial it was. I'm sorry. I went looking and I couldn't find it again, but it's interesting.
But the idea being that the advertisers of whatever product want to associate themselves with, they want to make their product seem cool, so they included an EV charging.
Yeah, we are not old-fashioned. We are progressive. We are moving forward. Yeah. And the people who like our brand they're not old people. They're younger with perhaps climate on their mind. And it wasn't a climate. It wasn't a greenwashing commercial. It was just a product commercial. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that was very cool. Did you know that there is more Hyundai dealerships in Florida than there are Ioniq 5s? Somebody threw out that fact on Twitter the other day. This is our ongoing concern that I have, at least, of the number of Ioniq 5s that are being made. I'm told 2 to 3 years. Different people have heard different things. Come on, Hyundai. Why? And it pisses me off because they're advertising them constantly. And it's a great car, and they're not selling them. I was watching the local news, the same local news where that weather report was on, and I saw that at North Portal, Saskatchewan, which is on the North Dakota border, it's a border crossing. That's one of the 2 main ones that we have here when we go to the States. You and I believe, went through there on our way to Fargo Film Festival one year.
Yeah, for sure.
This is a very popular crossing with a lot of trucks. And I guess the Canadian government put some money into it and redid it. And what struck me, and what really wasn't mentioned in any of the press releases or stories, is, other than a brief passing message, that they put solar panels up. But they had a video of the solar panels, and they're vertical. They're on the side of a building. And I'm very curious as to the reasoning for that. I mean, it's a tall warehouse-like building, with big bays in it that you go into with like a semi-truck for getting searched for drugs. And I'm watching some drug shows on Netflix right now. But yeah, so you could squeeze a lot of panels on there, but they're expertly done, and they're just, they take up all the space at the side of the building perfectly. And yeah, I just thought that was an interesting choice. And man, I'd like to know why. Like, that's because that was the only place, or is it power? Is there a battery backup? Because the border operations have to keep going and power outages and things. Like, I'd like to know more. Why was border crossings a priority for solar?
No, if anyone knows, let us know. But I certainly, the one argument I can think of is that, yes, if there is battery backup or something and they need to run it 24 hours, that would be really good for the winter, because, of course, the sun is really low in the sky where we live. And so vertical panels would do the best job of charging up those batteries in the winter. And maybe they don't need that much power in the summer. I don't know, just a thought.
Another update I would like to throw at you is that Electric says the Ford F-150 Lightning all-electric pickup truck is likely sold out for at least 2 years. And also, they updated the long-range 0 to 60 time over... Well, I guess they never really announced it, but apparently it's under 4 seconds, which is more than they initially promised. So that's pretty cool.
That's crazy for a huge, heavy vehicle like that.
I don't know what that would feel like, because you're not like in a sports car close to the ground. You're in this big, heavy thing way off the ground, and then you're going like Porsche 0 to 60 times pretty much. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and that's just, you know, for all the males who own a truck out there, I mean, you know, you want that. You want it. I also, Brian, I have a story here from our city who we're about a 200,000 or so people, 250,000 city. They bought an electric F-150 pickup truck, and there was, you know, they got the press together and did stories on it. So they think they're going to save $40,000 a year. They only got a hold of one, by the way. They tried to get 5. They only got a hold of one.
Yeah.
They think the $40,000 a year in gas savings on paper. They say that's what it is on paper, plus maintenance savings that they'll have to study. So they're going to study it. And yeah, they got it last week. And it was only a month ago that they ordered it. So they got like, maybe somebody canceled their order or something, but they got lucky, I think. And they got all kinds of stickers on it, and, you know, the whole advertising that it's electric for the city. Yeah, supply chain issues are apparently involved. So it was $62,000 Canadian, which they paid. The internal combustion engine, I guess, version is about $37,000. So they say the 40,000 on fuel annually.
Yeah, I mean, depending on if it's gasoline or diesel, I don't know. The price of diesel, I don't know if you noticed, has been a lot higher than the price of gas. They're usually about the same around here. The price of gas has come down quite a bit, but the price of diesel is still up around $2 a liter. I could certainly see, you know, busy city vehicle driving around doing maintenance stuff all day. Yeah, 40 grand a year in fuel and maintenance. Absolutely.
And idling in the wintertime, they'll probably be running all day, even if they're not moving.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what department is going to use it. I think just the general department. It'd be nice if, you know, they spread it around and let different, you know, heads of departments, you know, use it for like a week or two at a time and just sort of get used to it. And they also added it's almost like they listened to this podcast. They said, as the price of EVs come down and the price of fuel rises, the argument just gets better and better. So this is something we've talked about since day one of the podcast. The whole economics of it is just going to I wouldn't have expected our city to sort of be talking that way, but, you know, if we can, then everyone can, because we're backwoods here.
Yeah. You know, when you compare energy systems, things like solar and wind, there's no fuel cost at all.
Oh, you remember when we were talking about electric scooters in India, the Ola S1, which was a kind of a big breakthrough, and we did some coverage of that a year ago when they were starting to move the because they made this giant gigafactory to make, you know, because 2- and 3-wheel transportation is king in India. That is what you have to tackle in order to get the air cleaner. And yeah, they've got this big factory with only women in it. It's so interesting that they've chosen only women to work in the factory.
Okay.
But now they're coming out with sort of a pared down version of that scooter, which is $960 US. That's if you put down a deposit today, but it's limited to, well, I guess their other scooter was like $1,700 US to start with. They think the prices will be coming down, and it did 115 kilometers per hour, which is 70 plus miles per hour. So it's highway speed sort of, so, which is scary for a scooter.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to, but
they call it the S1 Air, and it comes with a smaller 4.5 kilowatt motor and peaks at 85 kilometers an hour, which is 53 miles per hour. And it's more of a city scooter, but they're making lots of these things. It only has a 100-kilometer range at best, and there's no swappable batteries on these, which I wish there were. So Geely is the company that does that in Asia, right? And they're starting to bring those in places to Europe. I think that's a great idea. And it may be suitable for some people and not for others, but yeah, it actually charges fairly fast. So, and they do have a charging network. So yeah, that's just one thing.
Great.
Now, do you want to talk about Miss Truss, who is gone?
Yeah, so UK, they had a new prime minister just a couple of months ago. We made fun of her immediately because she was mocking solar panels out in fields, which she thought was ugly. And so I think you and I can take credit for her having to resign.
We're a very powerful show.
Just 44 days as the UK's prime minister. Now, there were other issues. It wasn't really her complaining about solar panels. Her economic policies did not go over well and seemed to tank the UK economy. I think that was maybe her main issue. But
Well, let me
already
give you some
replaced.
background on her environmental stuff, because I've written down some of it from the Guardian. It says
Yeah.
her ministers seem determined to rip up environmental protections, but they were facing a lot of resistance from an extraordinary alliance of wildlife charities and green-minded conservatives. So they had to announce a bewildering range of measures to reach its holy grail of economic growth, and squarely trashing the environment. They seem to do it on purpose. You know, there's a lot of conservative people in Britain who are pro-environment, like the royal family, for example, who are quite conservative, but actually do care about the environment because they're very in touch with it.
Yeah, I guess that doesn't seem to be the case around here, so that's not something I typically think of.
I guess she proposed a public information campaign on energy savings, but refused to address insulation for Britain's drafty homes. I guess that's a bigger issue in Britain than it is here, because people sort of, it doesn't get quite as cold in Britain, but it is, so they just turn up the heat and they manage to survive. And she sought to block the development of solar farms inexplicably. And so Rishi Sunak, the head of Lettuce, that is now Prime Minister, I just wanted to point out that he got a 2 out of 5 score. No, he got a 3 out of 5 score from The Guardian on climate. Truss only got 2 out of 5, okay? But Boris got 4 out of 5. So make fun of his hair and his ineptness.
We have.
But he was strong on the environment, especially for conservative PM. So, this getting back to Sunak, I was interested in he's rich, so he has no connection to anything. Let's face it, he's not going to last.
Okay.
He's a billionaire. But he stood in the way of policies that would have reduced greenhouse gas emissions in the past. But, he's a little bit better than the last person. At least he's not talking about ungodly looking solar panels on farms, and now that's wrong somehow, and now we should go backwards. So it's a plus. One candidate, by the way, who was vying for PM got a 0 on climate, so she didn't get it.
I want to move on to Fully Charged Australia, although I don't really have too much more to say. So Fully Charged, this comes from Robert Llewellyn's YouTube channel, and they do these live shows that are like an expo of clean, green energy and technology. And they announced recently they were going to do a show in Canada next year, and now they're going to do one in Australia. And I just think this is super fun and interesting, and I'm hoping that, you and I can make it there to the one in Canada, and who knows, maybe even Australia.
It's a long trip, and remember to bring sunscreen if we do go, because it's very close to the equator. It's a hell of a trip to Australia. I know because my daughter looked it up because she wants to go there, which is wrong.
Yeah, no.
It's not a good idea.
I would like to go someday as well.
I've never been. I have plenty of people I know. Like Australia is like this fanciful land that everybody wants to go to, that in New Zealand. So I've got young people I know and relatives and nieces and nephews that have gone. My nephew actually made the international news when he went there because, I forget what, some tide took him out to sea or something, and he fought off a shark with his foot. I can't remember, but there was some story that was, I wish I could remember, but that's just kind of funny.
It sounds like a typical day in Australia.
Yeah, but when my family member goes there, the other side of the world, and it makes international news, that's just typical anyway. Well, good luck to them. I don't know if I could handle the plane flight, honestly. Like, that's a long way. It's got to be 24 hours of flying.
It is about that. It's a nasty flight,
Until we have the Clean Energy Show private jet fueled by solar panels. Maybe we could get our own solar plane.
Oh, and by the way, I looked into it this week because, like, I've always wanted to do like maybe a transatlantic crossing on a ship, like go from New York to London on a ship, because I don't really like flying. That's also kind of an unpleasant flight. But I checked into it, and unfortunately, the carbon footprint is much worse if you take a ship than flying.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because you're just burning a massive amount of diesel fuel. It takes about 6 days to cross the ocean. And, obviously a plane uses a lot of fuel, but it's done in just a few hours. So it's about double the carbon footprint if you want to take a ship over to Europe.
That's amazing. Double.
Not to mention the other issues, there's waste issues with cruise ships where they're possibly just dumping their waste out in the ocean, which is not ideal.
Wow.
Airplanes don't do that.
I mean, to think of your weight compared to the ship, but then you probably got like 5 people. You've got a magician, you've got a chef, you've got, all kinds of porters and things, and a comedian.
I always travel with a personal magician, for sure.
But they put all those people on the ship. There's only like 4 or 5 flight attendants and a couple of pilots on a jet. But I would think that your weight ratio to the jet, which has to get off the ground, it's just mind blowing that twice as bad. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you have to wait for hydrogen ships then. Anyway, okay, so Reuters has a story on Toyota. This made a lot of waves for people like you and me and our listeners who know that Toyota is slipping up. They are basically stopping their EV plans, okay?
Because they want to start over.
They want to start over. Here's Reuters talking about it.
They say the automaker could rewrite its $38 billion plan for electric cars in a bid to catch Tesla. While a working group looks into that, Toyota has reportedly suspended some of the 30 EV projects announced in December. The revamp could slow the rollout of cars already under development.
So basically, they've come to an apparent realization. This is backed up by minimum of 4 sources on each point. Some of them have more sources. So this is a legitimate thing. They had a $38 billion EV rollout plan, which apparently was planning to take decades because EVs weren't going to take off for decades. This is from not that long ago. And
so they thought.
Yeah. So a working group within Toyota has been charged with outlining new plans by early next year for improvements to its existing platform. This could mean that they dump everything and make a platform and start over again. But they're panicking. They're realizing, apparently it was triggered largely by Toyota engineers realizing that Tesla, with its gigapress, making one giant piece instead of a whole bunch of little pieces and putting them together and saving money that way, they realized, we're not going to be able to compete against that.
Yeah, and Toyota has been known as the cost king. They are the kings of car manufacturing up until now in terms of cost. They've been the best at it. They've been making the most cars, and they've been dominating the industry for a long time now.
Well, that's pathetic, isn't it? I mean, they thought that it was not going to take off for decades. Toyota, what's wrong with you? They would need to sell about 3.5 million EVs a year, roughly 1/3 of its current global volume by 2030 to stay competitive. So 1 in 3 cars would have to be fully electric. I would suggest that 2/3 are what other automakers, other automakers are going to be selling. I would guess that Ford and GM will be selling 2 out of 3 cars will be fully electric at 2030 on the trajectory. Now, this is, barring nuclear war and authoritarianism in the United States and all kinds of things that could or could not happen. And, God help us, but they may opt for an EV dedicated platform engineered from the ground up. And I think probably they should do that. But I mean, I have to ask Brian, what about your sourcing of minerals for batteries? I mean, if you're not locking that up, you're way behind. And that is, it's scary and depressing, actually. It's sad.
Yeah, and when you need to operate at the level that Toyota operates, which is currently the biggest car manufacturer in the world. So they don't just need a few batteries. A company like Mazda is pretty small. They don't need as much, but Toyota.
Well, they're talking about, 4 or 5 years from now of getting, just getting this thing started, getting the cars out there. And by then I could be on my second Chevy. I could be like loyal to a god-awful brand that I don't care for, just because. And they, I remember them saying, well, we can switch on a dime if there's ever demand for EVs. It won't be. Yeah, well, tell that to your battery chain, your supply chain for batteries, because that's a big difference.
No, and we have a sort of an addendum to this story about Stellantis, formerly known as Fiat Chrysler, because they were in sort of a similar position. This is what their CEO said just a little while ago. He said, "What is clear is that electrification is a technology chosen by politicians, not by industry." So this is what Stellantis was saying not that long ago, but they have changed their tune. So the new quote from the chief operating officer is, "The people have decided we will be purely electric." But yeah, this is certainly the refrain was from a lot of the laggards. A lot of the laggards were just complaining that this was being forced down their throats by government and by policy. But as we just said earlier, once you drive an electric car, you know it's better, and that's what the people are going to want.
Wow. That's just wow. I can't believe that. It's stunning. Stunning. And you know, incumbents, they are the people who get screwed.
Yeah. No, Toyota's going to have a real struggle to turn that ship around. So I thought this was a really interesting story from the Renew Economy website. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because the headline is kind of the best thing about it is the headline on Renew Economy: energy loss is the single biggest component of today's fossil-based electricity system. As we often talk about, you know, like an electric car is just way more efficient in terms of its energy than a gasoline car. A lot of the energy in the gasoline just gets wasted as heat. There's so much excess heat. So if you think about it, an entire system, an electricity system based on fossil fuels, you know, you're just wasting most of the energy. Most of the energy does not get converted to electricity. So for natural gas, 56% of the energy is lost. For coal, it's 68% of the energy is lost. And even with nuclear, 67% of the energy is lost. That one I'm a little more confused about. I don't know how that works exactly. But not only are we burning all these fossil fuels, most of them are just being wasted.
Now, this brings to mind some of the stories we talked about over the summer where nuclear plants and even coal plants had to shut down in certain places because the water that they put into the rivers that they were, you know, France, I think is an example, were making the rivers too hot. The rivers, due to climate change already in this particular summer, were too hot, and they had to shut down because they couldn't make them hotter because it would destroy the ecosystems. So, yeah, and even in Saskatoon, a small city where we live, my son always points out the power plant there puts really hot water into the river, and that affects certain things. Like the locals there apparently talk about this stuff. So, I guess you're wasting that. You're not recycling it as much if it's really, really hot. Or if it goes up in steam, then, you know, I don't know, maybe they're not efficient because they don't have to be.
Further on the article here, like, you know, we know that like something like a solar panel is not, you know, 100% efficient. Like 24% efficiency for a solar panel is sort of typical. So you might think, oh, okay, well, that's as wasteful as, you know, it's as inefficient as these other things. But as I said off the top of the show, the fuel costs are exactly zero.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about fuel costs. So it doesn't matter if it's only 24% efficient.
You know, there's a podcast I was listening to this morning at the gym. I have to look it up. Looking it up now. I'm holding it up on my phone. Which one was it? It was the Energy Viz Climate podcast hosted by my possible cousin, Ed Whittingham. He calls himself Whittingham.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But he had on somebody from the Energy Gang, which is one of the top climate podcasts there is, and it's an American. So a lot of these podcasts are very in the weeds. They're for people who work and do policy for climate, and they're not for...
We're for the people.
We're for the people. Clearly. Yeah. Clearly. Even in Australia. Yeah, it's most of it goes over my head. But, you know, they were talking about this very thing, that there was this this figure about, for instance, oil. It's the number of barrels that you would need to make the oil for what you get out of it. And the ratio there is 4 barrels to make 10. And with solar, it was 1. And the person that was talking about these new studies that were looking at this. And apparently the threshold is like 1 to 10 or 10 to 1. And that's where renewables are or better. And it's diminishing returns after that. But if at the point of oil, and it gets worse, of course, with the oil sands in Alberta, because it's harder to extract that, takes more energy to extract that. So, and they're talking from the point of view of investment. which is really important because it just goes to show how numbers like this will show that the investment in renewables is way better, by the way.
Yeah, with a fuel cost of zero, you can't go wrong.
Now, I've got so much on the show this week that, I only put stuff on the show that I'm interested in. Usually we do. Sometimes we put in stuff that we update past stories because we want to make sure that we're clear on everything that we talk about. But there's so much that has interested me this week, Brian, that I just have to skim through it all really quickly. BBC had a story on wind turbines, and so the total pipeline of wind turbines that are floating, because that's something that kind of interests me, because there's floating wind turbines are just coming online now, because that opens up deeper oceans that are more than 60 meters deep. So there's a lot of coastlines that could cover. And apparently they're not passive. These structures are not passive. They actually they're like a tripod with 3 floating, sections at the bottom, and they transfer water or weight to different ones. They're computer controlled, and they will transfer so they keep them upright and to fight the wind and different things like that. So a network of pumps and valves shift liquid ballast between the 3 floating cylinders to rebalance the platform. And below the surface, weighted subsea cables attached to huge anchors on the bottom of the ocean make sure the platform is firmly secured to the seabed.
Now, that reminds me, years and years ago on PBS, there was a show called Skyscraper, or it was a documentary series about building this new skyscraper in Manhattan. This was about 25 years ago. And the building in question, don't remember the name of it, but it had a sort of like a triangle shape on the top of it. But the building had a counterweight on the top of the building that would slide back and forth. So tall skyscrapers, do you remember that?
Yeah.
Tall skyscrapers will blow around in the wind, like, as much as a few inches. And this is planned for, and this is built into the structure. But this one particular building, they put a giant floating it was on some kind of a slippery rolling surface, and it would counterweight as the building, swayed back and forth. This weight on the very top of the building would counteract I just thought that was wild. So this sounds like this is something similar.
Yeah. And I don't think that's unique to that building. I think there's a lot of really tall skyscrapers that have that.
Yeah.
And God help you if that system breaks down.
Yeah.
You don't want that system to break down or just get out of the building. I guess, the building can handle it, but this sort of makes it less nauseating because they have to give at a certain point. Okay, so it's time for the tweet of the week. The relatively new feature. This is from Simon Evans, PhD. He has got expertise in this area of clean energy. He says, wow, China just built more offshore wind capacity in the year of 2021 alone than the rest of the world had managed in the last 5 years combined. So, we criticize, China is politically criticized for, having a lot of emissions and growing emissions, and they're still building coal, but they're building a lot of wind capacity, and that brings the prices down and also increases the learning curve for improving those things. So it's 26 gigawatts now in China, and that accounts for nearly half the world's almost half of the world's 54 gigawatts of total. So that's amazing. And it's added twice as much in 2021 as the IEA, the International Energy Agency, even forecasted in December 2021. So it just shows that the IEA doesn't know squat about anything. Like, they're just way off all the time.
And China can move quickly.
China can move
quickly when it wants
briefly, some feedback for the show. We heard from Sean in Dublin last week with an online voicemail. Well, he's back with another one.
Our new correspondent.
Our Ireland correspondent. No money involved, okay?
Hi, this is Sean Hines from Dublin, Ireland again, just giving you a quick update on Ireland's renewable energy progress. We had a lot of thunder and lightning here during the week, and one of our wind turbines was hit by lightning and went on fire and is now out of commission. It is Ireland's only offshore wind farm, which is crazy, considering we have so much coastal area and so much wind potential. But it was a wind farm that was installed in 2004, and it's still only Ireland's only offshore wind farm. And one of the turbines was hit, and I will send you a video of it via email there of it on fire. Thanks. Love the show.
Of course, he sent me an email and he said he couldn't find the video. Now, I did see the picture, so I pieced together what that would sound like myself.
Very good.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. Okay, so we'd like to hear from you. Contact us at our Gmail address, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Our handle on various multimedia social media platforms is Clean Energy Pod. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel. Speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow is where you find us for leaving an online voicemail like Sean did. And we love that when you do that because we love to hear what you guys sound like. And it is time for the lightning round, a fast-paced look at the week in clean energy and climate news. And Brian, it's going to have to be doubly fast this week. So let's get started. Electric Montgomery County Public Schools, one of the largest school districts in the United States, has deployed the single largest electric school bus fleet in the country. It's got a total of 86, and it'll be fully electric in 10 years. And you cannot do this fast enough. I saw the Biden administration, I think, somewhere today with a school bus big announcement. So, yeah, it's clean the air, you know. Considering this, along with the carbon emissions caused by 17,000 gallons of fuel that diesel buses use daily, electrifying our school bus fleets is an oppressive public health, climate change, and environmental property. You don't want your kids breathing diesel gas outside the bus or inside, because there's fumes.
They are nasty.
Development in EU gas prices. Apparently, their storage of natural gas is full due to a warm autumn, an unexpected warm autumn. Had one here as well, as you were saying, until it wasn't. And prices have gone negative briefly. So, yeah. Plus, it's been pointed out that there's $2 billion worth of solar modules in EU warehouses waiting to be installed. And here's some of the countries that are going for 100% renewable energy by 2030. Portugal, Netherlands, Denmark, Austria.
Yeah, that's amazing. And they've been planning to stockpile natural gas because of the problems having to get natural gas from Russia. So they were certainly planning to fill up their, storage with natural gas, but they did such a good job of it, and it was so warm they didn't need it. They got too much.
From The Guardian, the Australian state of Victoria, which is closer to the equator than I thought a week ago, will likely switch from burning brown coal, the worst coal there is, for 2/3 of its electrical grid, right down to 100% renewables with storage before 2035. And it would be one of the fastest transitions from a high pollution power grid to near zero emissions systems anywhere. And, it just shows what you can do. And we have a bad grid here. We have 50% power, and, we could be doing better, but we're not. We're aiming for 50% renewable by then. That's idiotic.
Yeah. It's the sooner you switch, also the more money you save.
CES Fast Fact: in 2022, oil producers reinvested only about 7% of revenues into their operations compared to 25% in 2014 during the last boom. What does it tell you, Brian?
It tells you that they can see the writing on the wall, and they're trying to get as much money out of the system as possible as it sort of heads downward. They know it doesn't pay to spend more money on fossil fuel infrastructure.
And you can't, the numbers don't lie, okay? You can argue about things all day, but when investment money does one thing or another, you know what's going on. U.S. hydrogen fuel cell cars, sales of said cars decreased to 153 in the third quarter of 2022. Brian, I bought more boxes of Girl Scout cookies in that time frame than people bought hydrogen fuel cell cars. Give it up.
Yeah, not looking good for hydrogen fuel cell cars.
So news, GM has unveiled the 2024 GMC Sierra. The specs thereof, this is their version of their pickup truck. It's going to have a 400-mile, 640-kilometer range, 754 horsepower, 0 to 60 as low as 4.5 seconds, not quite as fast as, the F-150. Interestingly, 800-volt architecture, and that means charging up to 350 kilowatts, which is, we don't have charging times yet, but That I always like to see that, especially now.
Yeah.
Especially with things that are coming out a couple of years from now. It's going to tow 9,300 pounds with a payload of 1,300 pounds, can power a home for 21 days, starting at 52,000 American in 2025. But the Denali Edition 1 costs $108,695 in early 2024, so still over a year before that happens.
Yeah.
From Ars Technica, New Jersey politicians want to ban subscriptions to car hardware like heated seats. New Jersey.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that earlier in the show. Subscriptions for many things coming to cars, and could be kind of awkward if they have to ban that in some places and not in others.
Tesla is continuing its growth in Asia, including Japan, and has recently placed their 50th supercharger in Japan, according to Teslarati. This is something we don't hear about a lot. We don't get a lot of Japan news, so that's interesting. I've been curious as to, because all their auto manufacturing has their head in the sand with EVs. What's Tesla doing?
Mm-hmm.
And will that change people's minds?
Yeah. No, and Tesla still has a lot of countries that they could be expanding to, and not that many inroads into Japan yet.
Concrete accounts for 8% of global emissions, but a new Department of Energy policy would use $5.8 billion from the IRA, that is the Inflation Reduction Act. We're going to start calling it IRA now, because that's what the insiders do, to find ways to lower emissions. The bulk of the industry's emissions come from making the concrete powder. They have to heat that limestone in a kiln to 1,400 degrees Celsius. So that takes a lot of energy just to get limestone into cement powder. And 80% of the energy is made up of smaller operators. That's kind of one of the challenges, because you have to have the cement plants close to where you're pouring it within 60 to 90 minutes. So that's, makes sense. But more companies are beginning to look for substitutes for portions of the cement mixture that limestone is, including microalgae. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. Another CES fast fact. PM Sunak is the first British PM to have more money than the monarch. Brian, he's thinking
what?
Rich.
He's that rich?
He is that rich.
Really?
He is that rich.
Oh, my.
You should listen to our show. You'll learn a lot.
Yeah.
How many Teslas per supercharging station, you ask? Well, 750 to 1, or 80 cars on the road per stall. And that's 20% higher than the global average was a year ago. So they're actually increasing the proportion. With all the sales they're doing, they're still increasing the proportion of the chargers that are available to you. But they figure they need 750 or 80 cars per actual charging stall. So 1 per 80 cars. Stationary energy storage business could grow 150 to 200% per year, faster than cars by a mile, according to Elon Musk, who I just saw walking into Twitter holding a sink. I had to text my son, what does this mean? He says it's a meme, of course.
Okay. Everything but the kitchen sink.
Let that sink in.
Tesla just, they had their third quarter earnings last week. And their energy business is up a lot. Of course, they've been battery constrained for, the car business and the energy business. But as things ramp up, they should have enough batteries to really grow their energy storage.
And finally this week, strategically burying 5% of power lines. Strategically, not just burying in random ones, but strategically burying them. Power lines in Florida and places like that. This is just 5% of them. Could reduce the number of residents affected by, heat waves, blackouts following hurricanes by nearly 40%, says the U.S. National Science Foundation report. I don't know why, as we address climate, that we're not putting more power lines underground, because you yourself just faced that. So that's because that's because the trees still had leaves on them, and the wet snow hit the trees, and then the branches came down on the line. So that happens this time of year if it turns suddenly bad.
Yes, and when I upgraded my own house to 200 amp service, they buried the power line from the alleyway because we could do that.
Yes. Well, that's our show for this week. We'll be back next week with another one. We'd love to hear from you. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. The links to everything related to our show is in the show notes, so check that out. If you have anything to tell us, anything, comments, suggestions, or feedback, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. If you're new to the show, remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast app to get new episodes delivered every week. And I can't wait till next week, Brian.
Yeah, see you next week.